Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started. So I want to keep the updates from the Semantic Kernel side pretty light, since we've been kind of blasting Discord and our blogs on kind of what the latest is. So later today, we are expecting to land RC4, which from our estimation, like there should be very, very few breaking changes from RC4 to v1.0. We're actually seeing the end in sight, which is shocking. If you asked me, we'd be here. I might have not believed you a month ago. So RC4 will go out today. Our original hope was to ship v1.0 on Friday. We'll likely do that on Monday, just to give us another weekend to catch any other fires that might pop up. So that's what's happening in the semantic kernel side. In terms of like known issues that we're aware of, there's a few challenges with overriding execution settings that's coming. We also know there's some challenges with the handlebars planner. There's some scenarios that the community has thankfully found as part of the hackathon. Those might not all get fixed by V1, hence why we're keeping the handlebars planner experimental until we get all of those resolved. But the main issues that folks have been hitting, I believe those should be rolling out as part of the release later today. Okay. And JK, I will take your question when we get to the Q&A. So we'll definitely follow up with that. So without further ado, I'd love to kind of highlight, show off, if folks are here to speak to their projects, the finalists for the hackathon. And so I'm going to go in no particular order. Actually, I'll go in order of submission for the finalists. So we've chosen 4 finalists. We'll review what they made. I emailed all the finalists. Some of them were able to make the community office hours today. If they are here, they can speak to it. If not, I'll do my best, kind of talking about why we picked it and why we thought it was so great. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and pull up my screen, and we will walk through the finalists. Okay. Sorry, y'all. Okay. So I think a few folks saw this one on the Discord already. This one we were very excited to see. One, it's just kind of cool, right? Having AI drive a drone. There's also like kind of video of the drone doing their thing based on commands from Semantic Kernel. But the other reason why we were really excited about this being one of our finalists is it's showing off a lot of the concepts that we're wanting to introduce with assistants. So as part of the kind of the videos and the GIFs, they're actually showing how these different assistants, the drone pilot and the project manager, can talk to each other in order to pilot this drone. So I want to take a pause there and see if El Bruno is online to speak about their submission. Otherwise, I can do a little bit more.
Yes, Matthew, I'm here. Hi, and hey, thanks. Really, thanks. This is just a pet project for me to learn more about semantic kernel. I need to do something quoting real. And I say, okay, maybe I can do something with drones and C# get here. And hey, it was nice to learn about the skills, the project manager idea. I really, really love how we can put it all things together. And hey, I like it. It was a fun experience. I have a couple more ideas over here now, but after the new releases and the new blog post and more, oh my God, I can do more here. But yes, it's just a fun project. Don't do this at home, please. On production. At home, yes.
No, it's exciting to see kind of the project manager concept. If folks aren't kind of familiar, you can actually define multiple agents define them as plugins, and then give them to a project manager, and they can actually coordinate multiple of these things. And so you can actually see kind of in the console logs the project manager talking to that drone agent. And we really think next year, 2024, is going to be the year of agents. And this project manager concept we borrowed very heavily from AutoGen. And so we imagine a lot of other types of ways agents to talk to each other in the future, and this is a good example of it. Are there any questions from the community, the call on Bruno's project? If not, I guess I have a question for Bruno. Like, what comes next? What other pet projects do you have kicking up for Semantic Kernel?
Hey, I wanted to add some video features. One thing that I didn't have time to try here is to do, we can also access the camera of the drone. The drone is a super cheap, not expensive toy drone, but we have some video features here. So I was thinking, okay, I maybe can, I don't know, I want to do something with video. I need to think about that, but because it's easy right now, little pieces connecting all together, not easy, but we can do that. Probably the next evolution of this with something with video. I need to think about that.
Awesome. And I know early next year, top of mind for us is adding more multimodal interfaces to Semantic Kernel. So hopefully we can get some video models to help you out with those projects. Alrighty, well, thank you, Bruno. And thank you for the wonderful submission.
You're welcome, thanks.
Okay, so next we have the, there we go. The secure Gen mask submission is the contributor for this one. I have the list of everyone's names on another screen. Oh, there. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's hard to pronounce. That's okay.
Okay. Yeah, you want to speak to your submission? I love this one because it's very enterprisey.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, primarily, so the motivation behind this was, one of the reasons why enterprise are concerned about using AI is usually around, security, PIIs, and privacy and things like that. So, just thinking of how can we use like semantic kernel, and I had fun also like doing this. So this is more like just a plugin that can do that functionality. So the plugin works in two ways, and then it works in a way that it uses like a local function to identify the PIIs, which is just like normal regular expressions. So, and then he also then has like another AI driven capability borrowing from Azure AI service. There's something called Azure language, and there's a PII detection engine as well. So I just did like a configuration on the plugin in the config to say, do you want to use Azure or do you want to use the local, the local function? So if you do use like any of them, you will be able to invoke that function. So that's one way. Another interesting thing is there are multiple ways you can actually use the function in the long run. You can use it as a plugin, or you can actually use that as a native function to like identify the PIIs and then redact them from the messages. So you can do that either from the message going to the AI or the one coming back from the AI. I mean, I wouldn't expect the AI to be giving you PIIs back, but who knows, right? Because they're different models this day. So you can also use that. So it's like forward and backward. And then the last one is also, the last concept is around using the function hook, which is like events that you can listen to before the prompt is, rendered, or before the function is executed. And then if you do that, you can actually either also pass some instruction of reduction into the prompt, or you can just run the native function inside that event. So yeah, so pretty much it's pretty light. But yeah, I really had fun, working on this. In my opinion, I think enterprise customers are very, very concerned about privacy. So if we could like build this into something that's like, it's like almost like standard, in semantic kernel, it would make a lot of it will make the adoption like way much faster. So that's my opinion. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. No, and I couldn't agree. Like, we added these event hooks, and you're probably one of the first people that we've seen actually use it for these enterprise scenarios that we're imagining. Like, oh, we need to redact things. We need to make things compliant. So early next year, we definitely want to have some out-of-the-box hooks, and we're definitely going to be referencing your hackathon to see how we can have similar behavior as out-of-the-box functionality in Semantic Kernel. So thank you for your submission. For everyone else, definitely check out these different events that are now on top of the kernel. There's one where the function's about to be started. You can see there's one on when the prompt is being rendered or after rendered, and then of course after the invocation. And AO does a really great job of showing how you can either manipulate the prompt that's sent to the AI, or actually provide some native function to change it. So thank you. This was a great submission.
Thanks, everyone.
All righty. Okay, the third one, we have the History Explorer ChatGPT plugin. Is J Creek here? Okay, if not, I'll briefly speak to it. So on the face of it, it looks pretty simple. It's like, oh, there's some prompts behind the scenes that allow you to kind of simulate a different type of person and get responses back. The reason why the Semantic Kernel team was particularly interested in this one is because if we open up some of the prompts, there's actually a bunch of different prompts, and it uses a planner to actually build these stories for these different personas. And for the Semantic Kernel team, being able to dynamically create personas is a really intriguing concept for us. Because I already mentioned, we believe next year, 2024, is all going to be about agents. And what we're learning about agents, especially as you start having agents work together, is you want, just like in the real world, you want a diverse set of agents that bring their own perspective, that have their own persona. So you want a designer agent to have a designer lens to make sure things look good. You need a PM agent to make sure things have requirements and are delivered in time. You need a coder that actually knows how to code, right? And then when you put them all in a chat room together, they can actually develop an application or solution that is better than if a single agent with their own single worldview tries to solve the problem. So we thought this was a really great kind of exploration into personas and making them dynamic in a way that the Semantic Kernel team hadn't thought of before. Okay. Cool. So that was J Creek's submission. And then the last one we have is Blazekill's submission, where they created a integration with Olama, which was really exciting. And then they built an additional plugin for Cypher and this Corgi quiz app that actually brings all these different pieces together. So is Blazekill on the call at all? Okay, if not, I'll just flip through this video real quick, kind of just highlight some of what they've done. So they've worked on building kind of this full architecture, where in the middle here, Semantic Kernel is actually playing around. But what we were really intrigued by the Semantic Kernel team, well, one, seeing all these pieces kind of come together is always exciting for us. Kind of escaping just these toy projects to kind of like actual enterprise deployments of these things. But what we've really seen a big push for is the use of local models. So if you're not already familiar, Olama is a really great tool to use local models on your own machine. But one of the challenges on the Semantic Kernel side is we don't have a really good connector with Olama. And so we've heard tons and tons of people saying, hey, I'd love to use a local model. I'm scared about what's happening with OpenAI. and things changing all the time. I want more options, right? I want to be able to use, say, Llama 2 locally on my machine. And so we were really excited about what Blazekill was able to build. We can go back to it. Because it was one of the next things that we wanted to work on, right? Is actually have a OLLAMA connector. And so if this is something that the community is interested in trying with local models, I highly recommend checking out their NuGet package, playing around with it. And I love that they're already using the new builder pattern that's coming with Semantic Kernel in order to add these new models from OLLAMA. So that's definitely one piece of it. And then if we look at the CodeGen plugin, they added some additional capabilities on it. So we were just impressed by one. They built one of the core features that Semantic Kernel has been lacking, that the community is going to appreciate with local models. And we were just impressed by them building these additional plugins and then wrapping it into this Corgi AI application that kind of shows kind of how Semantic Kernel can work in a production deployment, and is actually kind of fun and enjoyable to see it work. So there's actually this kind of question and answering experience where the AI is kind of testing your intelligence in different areas, right? And will tell you kind of what's right or wrong in these different areas. Okay. So those were our final kind of finalists. Our submissions. We had a ton of different submissions. These were just the ones that we picked to highlight for today. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Now we get to announce who the actual winner is. So everyone, drum roll, please. I'm the only one on mute. So what we ended up choosing was Blazekills, the last one that you saw. And yes, we'll link to the video. Actually, I'll link to all of the finalist submissions in the chat so folks can check them out. So yeah, the one we ended up choosing was the Corgi AI and the OLLAMA connector. Just because like it's an entire NuGet package that the community can already start using, and it really shows or highlights where the Semantic Kernel team wants to go immediately in the next year, which is even more model support, so that folks aren't tied to just OpenAI. And let me go ahead and share all the links. We have the drone one, just as a reminder, folks. The secure Gen mask, which is really exciting because it shows kind of the enterprise uniqueness to Semantic Kernel. So we love the enterprise. The History Explorer, which kind of shows the future of personas and more importantly, dynamic personas. And then lastly, I'm sharing Blazekill's project where you can get access to their video. So thank you. Obviously, we love seeing cool shit being built, and all of those that participated in the hackathon definitely did that. All of the finalists, we will be writing a blog post kind of highlighting what you built. So you'll get some public recognition. So yes, we're very, very happy. And I think what I'm selfishly happiest about is y'all helped kind of bug test the release candidate. We would have not, as a Semantic Kernel team, been able to catch all of the issues that all of you did if it weren't for the hackathon. So I'm very, very thankful and appreciative for all of the grind all of y'all did, especially with lacking things like solid documentation. So I'm frankly amazed y'all were able to build anything. And what y'all did build was amazing. Cool. Yes, we're going to have to find some like free swag to send y'all. It might be in the new year. but we'll definitely follow up with folks. Alrighty. So with that, let's go ahead and transition to Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up to the top because I did see there was a few questions in the chat. We'll start there. And if anyone wants to raise their hand and get in the queue for off mic or on mic questions, please go ahead and do that. Okay, so JK asked, any schedule when Chat Copilot will be updated with the latest semantic kernel? So we're still discussing this right now. I will share with the community first that we are likely going to start putting Chat Copilot into maintenance mode if it's not already in it. The main reason being what we as the semantic kernel team are starting to kind of realize as we look at what our customers want and what the industry is moving towards is these monolithic copilots, which is kind of what Chat Copilot is. They were really popular at the beginning because everyone wanted to recreate ChatGPT. But as we move to this multi-agent kind of world that AutoGen started creating, that semantic kernel is going to start supporting with assistants, we have a hard time imagining that you're going to go to this one portal where you talk to one agent. And instead, what we imagine the future being is you open up Teams, you open up SMS, you open up WhatsApp, and you're actually talking to multiple agents that can then help coordinate and work with you. And these agents should come to you, right? They should come to the chat services that you already are in instead of you coming to them. And so what we are going to be doing kind of in the next year is we do want to make sure that folks that are using things like Chat Copilot do have a good migration story to products and services that Azure AI has been building, right? They have some UI that supports chat experiences. But we're wanting to start pivot as a team semantic kernel to these multi-agent experiences and making it really easy for you to deploy these agents to places like Teams, WhatsApp, and other chat interfaces. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. John Harrison asked, if the handlebars planner is experimental and all the planners have been removed, what's the plan? So it's probably worth taking a step back and looking at our entire experimental strategy, I guess I should say. So if you've been playing with the release candidates, I think I've seen a few folks remark on this. What the hell? Everything's been marked as experimental. We've been working with this stuff forever. Like, what gives? What gives? The main reason we're doing that is we wanted to make it very clear to developers what we believe is going to be solid, like the interfaces aren't changing, and things that we're not like 110% sure that the interfaces or the behavior might subtly change, right? And so the things that are not experimental, the kernel itself, kernel functions, kernel arguments, like these core building blocks that are necessary for you to build plugins and give them to the AI. The OpenAI connectors are also a big part of that. There's a bunch of other things, though, that we don't feel as confident in. So all of our memory connectors, we know they're lacking. We know that they're not as good as they should be. So all of those are experimental, right? There are things that have just a huge surface area that we want to make sure we have really solid test cases on. So that's like the importing OpenAPI specs. OpenAPI specs are really complicated, and we aren't entirely sure if we've completely nailed it. So that will be experimental, right? And like the other big category that I want to call out is, of course, planners themselves. So I say this because if we did still have the sequential or the old stepwise planners that folks were using, those would still be marked as experimental, right? We would still not kind of expect them to be fully fine-tuned, because we do expect some additional research to happen in the planner and the auto invocation space, right? Now, the reason why we chose not to bring, and we have a blog post where we kind of shared a rationale on this. The reason why we chose not to bring sequential planner and the old stepwise planner into V1 is, frankly, they weren't that great, right? From our testing, if you added more than 6 or so functions, they started hallucinating, they started breaking down. We've heard complaints from folks that bad XML was being returned, and these things always were airing out. Now, are the new planers perfect? No. We're also working on kind of similar syntax issues with the handlebars planner, but we have seen, at least from our testing and what we're starting to hear from customers, is these things are more robust, they can handle more functions, they have more capabilities, and we want to really funnel all of the new users and even existing users like yourselves to kind of the latest and greatest. We don't want to have people using the old stuff that we know just doesn't work very well. If we know that there's something better, and we think our move to v1.0, while painful, is probably the best way to kind of encourage that migration. So I'll take, that was a very long answer because I know this is a sensitive topic, but I wanted to see if there's any questions from all of you on kind of a rationale, or if there's still questions on what you should be doing regarding planners. And if there's not, the other thing that I saw a question in Discord earlier this morning that I thought was a good one is like, hey, with auto function calling, do I even need these planners? And what I responded back to the person with was probably not. OpenAI's function calling is really, 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 really good, right? And so I'm actually imagining like all of the samples that we're writing for our new docs, they're just using auto function calling. So I do expect like 70, 80% of scenarios you'll just use that. There are cases when you don't want to use auto function calling from OpenAI and you would want to use what we call a planner. That's when the example I keep coming back to is that if you want to ask the AI to add every number between 1 and 100, if you use function calling, it's making 100 LLM calls, right? So you don't want to do that. You want to use something like the handlebars planner that has like looping inside of it, right? And then the value of something like the function calling stepwise planner is behind the scenes. It's still using function calling, right? It's still using the latest and greatest, but we are keeping our ear to the ground from the Semantic Kernel team side on what's kind of the latest, greatest research. And there are kind of techniques that you can layer on to function calling to make them a little bit better. And so we think that our stepwise planner that uses function calling will be that avenue, that shipping vehicle to add on some additional intelligence, for the lack of a better term, to function calling. Okay. Can you give a, this is awesome. Okay, there's a bunch of people talking about how amazing the projects were, which I totally agree. Curious, is there an equivalent of semantic kernel in GCP, or is it all Vertex AI? I'm actually not super familiar with GCP. Oh, Google Cloud Platform. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think there is. I think a lot of folks are, of course, like using LangChain, and then semantic kernel's big in the enterprise space. Jose asked, what were the handlebars issues identified, and the issues and limitations with agents assistance? So the issues that were resolved, I guess the TLDRs, we had some issues with complex object types and making sure that parameters were actually being passed correctly. So some of that has been addressed. There is one outstanding issue with semantic functions that we're investigating right now, and hopefully we'll have a fix soon. The other issue was, oh God, what was it? We had to do a lot of refactoring to make sure everything was passed correctly, and that's been resolved. What's still outstanding is if you use GTP 3.5 Turbo in particular, instead of the model returning back a gigantic block of handlebars code, instead it's kind of talking to you like it does on ChatGPT, where it says, here's what I'm about to do. Here's a snippet of handlebars, and here I want to do something else. Here's another snippet of handlebars. And because it's the handlebars plan is being broken up into these different sections, we're having a hard time parsing and rendering it. So the work that the team is doing right now is we are adding some additional logic so that we can actually extract the multiple handlebars chunks and reconstitute them as a single handlebars plan so that we can actually run it. What's happening right now is we're airing out on the non-handlebars content because our handlebars planner thinks it's handlebars. So it should be an easy enough fix, and we'll get that in hopefully in the next few days. Okay, and then issues and limitations with agents and assistants. I don't know what exactly this is referring to, so if you want to come off mute and ask. The biggest thing with assistants right now is the assistants API is limiting in a few instances. For example, the biggest one, if you haven't played with the assistants API before, is you can only add user messages to the main thread. All function calls, all system messages, all assistant messages has to come from OpenAI itself as the bot is responding to you. They're probably doing that to be like safe and make sure people aren't like impersonating the bot, but it is limiting if you want to do some advanced prompt engineering techniques. And so early next year, once we kind of have a solid implementation of the assistants API, we do want to build our own flavor of assistants, kind of an open source version of assistants that lacks some of those limitations so that you could do fancier, cooler things with agents. Question, concern. I want to ask you about Chat Copilot using Docker. Oh yes, we do know about the bug you filed about Chat Copilot and some auth issues. I believe you created an issue for it. If not, and you just said something on Discord, please create an issue. We're going to follow up with you on that one. Okay. David calls out some stuff with LangChain. I guess the other thing I'm really excited about with V1, let's see if I can pull up this deck. For function calling, we actually like try to see what it would look like inside of LangChain, AutoGen, and Semantic Kernel. You're literally writing half as many lines of code in Semantic Kernel than in either of those two products. So we're really, really proud of the work that the team has done. Because I think a lot of people think LangChain are like, oh, it's better in all these dimensions. I think the way I want to hopefully have the market bifurcate in the new year is if you want the latest and greatest like AI research that may or may not be good, but you just want to try whatever the latest research paper has said, use LangChain. But if you want something that's like simple to use, minimal concept count, that has very few dependencies, that has things like events so that you can observe what the AI is doing, kind of going back to the project we saw earlier, that is when you'd want to use something like Semantic Kernel. And probably the biggest thing, of course, is also dependency injection. So that's kind of how I want to envision, and hopefully we can start creating mindshare around, is use LangChain if you want to do research and you want to do something cutting edge. Use Semantic Kernel if you actually want to deploy something real to your customers that you can depend on and know that the AI isn't doing something nefarious with you. Okay, I found this slide. Just going to pull this up real quick, just in case if you have fans of LangChain that you talk with, you can go, actually Semantic Kernel, it's pretty amazing. So on the left here, we have LangChain. And if you want to do a very basic scenario where you create some functions that turn on and off a light bulb, right? And then have function calling, actually have the AI turn these things on and off. The way you do it in LangChain is you first have to create your functions, create an instance of it, define it, right? You can't just define it on top of the class. And then you actually create your prompt, do some binding with their pipeline syntax called LCEL, which between y'all and me, I still haven't figured out how it actually works. It seems confusing to me before you finally get an agent and you can actually invoke it and talk to it. I'm really, really proud of the work that the Semantic Kernel team has done. Because instead the experience is you create your functions once, you define it in line with the functions with attributes, right? Instead of having it separated into two different sections. And then You add all these things to the kernel. Remember, the kernel is the center of everything. It has all of the different pieces that you want. And because the kernel is this like central force that has all of your models, all your plugins, you don't have to build things like these chains, right? All you have to do is tell us, hey, I built my kernel. This is my prompt. I want you to automatically use the plugins inside of the kernel in order to respond to the user, right? And because we've kind of put all this stuff in the kernel, fewer lines of code, right? You don't have to wire things up yourself. We will wire that up for you within the kernel. You have better observability. You can add events on top of the kernel, as we saw earlier. When anything happens, that's important, right? So you can redact things or cancel requests, whatever it is, right? And the last one, which I think AI researchers actually will be a big fan of, is reproducibility, right? With dependency injection, you can create a kernel once with all of your settings, all of your plugins, all your configuration once, and know that throughout your entire application, it will use whatever settings you use. And if in the future, if you decide, oh, actually, if I increase the temperature or if I change the setting and the execution, I get better results, you weren't chasing through spaghetti code in order to make that fix. You go to a single kernel that's in your dependency injection, update it, and it flows through your entire application. The challenge with something like prompt flow is because it's not unifiedly defined in a single spot, you will have to chase down multiple different places in your applications and update all of these different chains if necessary. So that's my sales pitch on why I think Semantic Kernel is the bomb. I'll leave the actual community and the rest of the world decide which ones they think is their favorite, but that's kind of my 2 cents. Okay. David has their hand up.
Yeah. Sorry, there's an echo for someone that's got their speaker on. Might be you. Sorry, Matt. In short, you're underselling the value, right? And I'll come off the camera so you can see my face. Like I'm serious on like persisting a kernel, right? It's like tagging a UUID to an environment. From an enterprise perspective, we don't currently have like an SR11-7 for financial services firms that agree about how we do feature selection for an LLM, but it's going to look something like, persisting a kernel that's reproducible for a given like execution. So this is absolutely something that's going to be crucial for enterprise. You are underselling the value. That said, I do have questions about the OLAM integration, right? Because the other side of like being the paranoid enterprise guy is that from a security perspective, I've now like parameterized and automated some of the LLM attacks that kind of got some traction last year from Carnegie Mellon, up to and including, not just like multiple model families like Llama or, other GPT-JA, right? But I'm trying to also extend it for Mistral, and I'm going to see if it also works on non-transformers, right? The point being that I would love to understand what you guys are looking to do for the integration of OLAMA as like a core part of making an API available, because I love the idea of using Nexus Raven to like format like a JSON response. That way I don't have to call GPT-4, et cetera. But I am concerned about the abstraction of the runtime environment, just because that's where I live and breathe. So happy to write that up and send it to you later instead of putting you on the spot. So
yes, please. So I obviously have thoughts, but Devis has his hand up, so maybe he has better thoughts than I do. Devis, go.
Yeah, I would just like to raise knowledge and visibility to this fantastic project called Llama CPP and Llama Sharp. So there's a team who wrote a C++ implementation to run Llama models on any machine with CUDA on Apple Silicon and CPU. And there is a nice project called Llama Sharp. They have done a semantic kernel adapter for Llama CPP. So I put a link in the chat earlier. If you take a look, you can today already run Llama 2, 7, 13, and more tokens, billion tokens if you have the memory. It's pretty fast on Apple Silicon. It generates a lot of tokens per second. It's a little bit slower on CPU, like it can take minutes. You can also run these Llama models on Azure if you have GPUs. And they are updating the Llama CPP library this week or next week to run also Mixtral. So I think it's about a matter of a couple of weeks, you will be able to run Mixtral on your local machine. Take a look at Llama Sharp. They have a NuGet 0.8.1 that supports up to Llama v2. I guess the next version will support the Mixtral. And we have added support for Llama Sharp directly into the kernel memory project, where you can say kernel memory builder dot use llama, and it works out of the blue, like without out of the shelf without having anything else to do. I think we can do the same in semantic kernel. The problem is that this is a third party NuGet, so it's probably better to promote these open source community contributions. You just have to load that NuGet into your project, and you can just say use llama instead of using OpenAI or anything else. Of course, there is an interface there in C# code. You can always implement an interface with a class that talks to a web service, and that web service can be implemented in Python. So you can also run Hugging Face models through a web service and talk to them from C# very easily. I think we have an example in the repo.
All +1 like Llama CPP. I don't have a lot that's CPU instead of GPU accelerated, just because I don't. But it's useful, right? When you're done, because I want to +1 like making sure that there's good smart integration with these things. I just really want to make sure that like I spell out why. I guess I'll parking lot it. So if we have time at the end, I'll parking lot it. But especially as Mistral gets really popular, because they're the first guys that have like a mixture of experts framework out, right? The only thing that's keeping me from generating like attacks that work against Mistral right now is a series of like else if statements and like how it handles like an embedding matrix, meaning that it's still transformers based. These are still absolutely vulnerable to the same sorts of attacks. While Llama CPP or OLlama could all integrate pretty well, I think the big concern I have is that if I love Semantic Kernel because it's great orchestrator, great planner, you can persist the kernels for reproducibility. If suddenly it's got the ability to just quickly deploy like a model that's vulnerable inside of it, then it's shot itself in the foot from an enterprise perspective. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
I'll happily write it up. So yeah.
Concern is we make it too easy for some rogue dev to add a model, add it to their enterprise kernel without them actually going through the process of making sure that what they're adding is safe. Oh, and you're muted.
Oh, you're good. Sorry. And specifically not having some kind of layer of abstraction between the runtime and the execution. So like Nemo guardrails, right? Bedrock also has guardrails that's basically just business rules, are good because what they'll do is they'll like interdict like a situation where a specific topic is being discussed, right? But because you can't program a business rule for everything, you can't catch everything, on top of the fact that if you have like an attack string that's been optimized for a particular model family, it may still work even though something's going on in the back, like depending on where it's looking at it. So, and forgive me, I've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old in the background. They're stressed, they're not quiet. I'm saying that it's not just the ability to deploy an LLM, because traditionally it's been hard to generate these attack strings, right? I'm saying that like it's now not difficult, on top of having looked at the code for how it parameterizes and like optimizes. It's really just like a couple of else if statements to get Mistral, and the same logic probably also applies to like non-transformers depending on their version of a detention mechanism. So I would love to write all that up. I promised Alex like a security blog on this like months ago, and I've been really busy. I have great excuses, but they're all excuses. So I'll stop talking, Matthew.
Yeah, let's have a follow-up. Since we're early on adding all these new models, there's definitely room to kind of influence how we do it to make sure that it's as safe as possible. Cool. Let me keep going through these questions. Do you have a timeline for bringing all the AutoGen stuff into Semantic Kernel? I think we're actually pretty close. So if folks haven't played around with the assistant kernel, I definitely recommend it. It's an experimental package right now. We blogged about it as part of our Ignite release. We already are starting to, Chris is on the call, but we've already started to like replicate a lot of the chat collaboration features. Now, the thing that we won't be touching is a lot of their code generation. So if you've played with AutoGen, the agents will actually create Python script and actually run it. That was something that on the Semantic Kernel team we will likely not touch. To us, that's kind of like a plugin or a feature that someone outside of Semantic Kernel should work on. Now, what I will add is if that is something that you're interested in, basically having these agents generate code and then execute it, we do have an effort being spun up inside of Microsoft to create a .NET version of AutoGen, and we're trying to get them to build on top of Semantic Kernel, so all these things kind of play nicely together. And so fingers crossed, if Microsoft politics goes the way Matthew wants, next year you would have a .NET flavor of AutoGen that is using Semantic Kernel behind the scenes, and that would allow you to build these agents that write code and execute it. Okay. Question: LangChain and Llama Index have done a lot on the loading and splitting and retrieval features that are important for RAG. Yes, this is very true, and this is an area that I am consciously not heavily investing in because I believe, particularly Llama Index, has an incredibly smart team and is kind of ahead of things. And what folks like Devis has shown me is like you can spin up things like Llama Index as its own service and then bring it in as a plugin into something like Semantic Kernel so that you can kind of get the best of both worlds. You can get all of the most state-of-the-art chunking and document parsing and all that stuff. And then you can bring in as a plugin to Semantic Kernel. So we have, of course, our own project that Devis is driving called Kernel Memory. If folks haven't played around with it, I highly, highly recommend it. But my expectation is those types of chunking, document ingestion features, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, those will continue to live outside of Semantic Kernel. And what we want to do on Semantic Kernel team is just make it extremely easy to bring those things in as plugins. So I would expect in the new year, if I were all of you, some more blogs and demos and even articles in our Learn site of how to bring in semantic memory, bring in Llama Index, bring in whatever the hottest kind of memory technology is, so that you don't feel left behind, and instead you can actually get the best of breed for each of these different AI components. Okay. Function calling is great for when we know which functions will be needed for a certain type of question, but we don't have to call the function ourselves and then embed the result into the prompt. I don't know what the question was in there, that one. So if you want to rephrase that, that'd be great. I'm sure ChatGPT, yep, check Discord when you have a chance. Yep. Work on a partner who's leveraging AutoGen agents with SK, and yep, great. GD4 Vision is available in Azure, and it requires Azure Computer Vision. Is there any plans to support it? So kind of going back to other model support, so we talked about Llama. The other big area of investment is multimodal. A lot of projects within Microsoft are now requiring, hey, we need to look at a picture, we need to understand what's going on, we need to generate pictures. So it's very top of mind to actually create interfaces and connections to these different models. My expectation is basically all of the different model types that are in Azure AI and Hugging Face. It appears those two orgs have actually aligned on the exact same model types. My plan, my hope is within Semantic Kernel, there should be an interface for every single one of those. I think there's like 20 or 30 of them. And then once we have all the interfaces, it should become very trivial to create custom connectors to all of these different models that are multimodal. Okay. Drop. Thank you for the news. Alrighty, cool. So I think I read through all the questions. If I missed your question, definitely post it in the chat or come off mute and raise your hand. And And then Bowden's comment, my customer migrated to Llama Index and LangChain due to effective chunking and retrieval tactics, and they plan to stay there permanently and never return to Semantic Kernel. I hope we can convince folks to move back. For me, it's the enterprise features. Like events probably seem so boring, and middleware probably seems so boring, but no other SDK has that today. And that's where I want to drive a lot of enterprise investments. Like with a solid middleware that's attached entirely to the kernel, like imagine we'll be able to have out-of-the-box responsible AI. We'll have out-of-the-box redaction stuff. We'll have out-of-the-box kind of tools to make sure that these agents aren't doing something that they shouldn't. And that'll be really hard, if not impossible, to implement in something like LangChain. So as this space matures and as people actually start deploying things and realize that they need to have observability, I do think that will create the opportunity for discussions on, hey, do we want to move to Semantic Kernel because of these enterprise capabilities? Okay. Treat the various memories like cache levels. Events are essential, yes. That's a DAG, and some way you can find a schema with some content. Okay, cool. Alrighty. Well, thanks again, folks. It looks like we're ending right on time. Again, thank you everyone that participated in the hackathon. We would not be at the state where we feel as good about our V1 landing as we do right now if it weren't for all of you actually trying our code and telling us, yo, this shit don't work. Or, hey, you broke my scenario. So really, really appreciate it. And congrats again to the finalists and the winner. Like I said, we'll be writing a blog post. I do want to reach out to each one of you to make sure I get the right bio and kind of right messaging across. So it might be a few days, it might be next week before we actually get that published. But I want to make sure we do it right. So again, thank you, everyone. And I'm excited about the new year. So happy winter break, everyone. And we will see you in January.